23.5 tons. That is the launch weight of what arrived over Jerusalem on March 15th. Not a drone, not an aging liquid fuel ballistic relic from the 1990s. A solid fuel super heavy ballistic missile called the Sejjil-2, traveling fast enough to reach Jerusalem from western Iranian launch positions in approximately 7 minutes, carrying a warhead large enough to reduce reinforced military infrastructure to rubble. 7 minutes, from launch to impact. The entire Israeli civil defense architecture, the sirens, the shelter protocols, the public warning system, is built around a 90-second response window from the moment an alert is issued. Not from launch, from alert. Assuming perfect and immediate detection, a population has 5 to 6 minutes from the moment this missile leaves its launcher to reach safety. For anyone already near a shelter, that is tight. For anyone who is not, it is almost nothing. For any defense system simultaneously managing dozens of other threats arriving from other vectors, which, in Wave 54 of Operation True Promise 4 it was, even that compressed window does not behave as planned. And here is what makes the Sejjil-2's debut more alarming than the 7-minute timeline. Iran had this missile on day 1. It chose to wait 54 waves before using it. That decision, to hold the most capable weapon in the inventory off the battlefield for the first 16 days of the conflict, is the strategic message that matters more than the warhead itself. A military that rations its most powerful systems is a military that is thinking in months, not waves. It is a military that is calculating not just what the next strike accomplishes, but what the 100th wave looks like, and what it saves for that moment. Stay with me, because what the Sejjil-2 represents is not just a weapon story. It is a story about strategic patience, about a conflict that has now escalated into a qualitative tier that Israel's defense architecture was not fully designed to inhabit, and about what each new weapons category introduced into this war tells you about what comes next. The two numbers that define the shift. There are two weights at the center of this story. Not casualty figures, not wave counts. Two weights, placed next to each other, that contain the entire strategic logic of what changed on March 15th. The first weight belongs to the Fateh-2, the hypersonic glide vehicle Iran had already deployed across earlier waves of Operation True Promise 4, approximately 4 tons at launch, traveling at Mach 13 to 15 on re-entry, arriving before Israel's civil warning system can complete its alert cycle. The Fateh-2's operational value is defined entirely by velocity, 4 tons moving at speeds that compress every defense timeline to its absolute limit, arriving in the terminal phase before residents are fully in shelter. The second weight belongs to the Sejjil-2, 23,600 kilograms at launch, 5 to 6 times heavier than the Fateh-2. Not designed to outrun the intercept window the way a hypersonic glide vehicle does, designed instead for something that requires an entirely different kind of strategic attention, mass, range, and payload capacity that place it in a separate class from anything else Iran had previously committed to this campaign. Where the Fateh-2 defeats a defense system through speed, the Sejjil-2 defeats it through scale. On March 15th, IRGC Aerospace Force Commander Brigadier General Majid Musavi confirmed the launch personally, not through a ministry statement, not through a press release, through a post on his official account. The confirmation was deliberate. The visibility was deliberate. Iran did not intend to obscure this launch. It intended for the launch to be seen, acknowledged, and understood. In the same wave, the Sejjil-2 flew alongside the Fateh-2. That pairing is not coincidental, it is doctrinal. The Fateh-2 at Mach 15 forces the defense system to compress its response timeline to the geometric edge of what interception allows. The Sejjil-2, moving on a different arc with a warhead several times heavier, forces the defense system to engage an entirely different threat, physics simultaneously, speed on one axis, mass on another, two problems that exploit two different limitations in the same operational window, against an interceptor stockpile that has been under continuous attrition since Wave 1. The Israeli defense architecture was not designed for both of those problems arriving at the same time. Why liquid fuel was always the weakness. To understand what the Sejjil-2 changes, you have to understand what Iran's older missile generations could not do. The Shahab series, the foundation of Iran's long-range ballistic missile program for decades, ran on liquid propellant. And liquid fuel, by its very nature, is a liability dressed as a weapon. Before a liquid fuel ballistic missile can launch, it must be fueled. That process takes anywhere from 30 minutes to several hours depending on the system. During that window, the transporter erector launcher is stationary. It cannot move. The fueling process involves large volumes of highly toxic, highly volatile propellant being loaded under pressure. The thermal signatures produced are detectable by reconnaissance satellites calibrated to identify exactly these pre-launch indicators. The chemical signatures dispersing downwind are detectable. The process announces itself before the missile ever leaves the ground. In practical terms, a liquid fuel missile gives the adversary a window, sometimes a significant window, to redirect assets, to attempt a pre-launch strike on the launcher itself. This is precisely why the American and Israeli targeting campaign has invested so heavily in Iranian ballistic missile infrastructure, storage facilities, launch complexes, production sites, against liquid fuel systems specifically. The pre-launch phase is the vulnerability. It is where the suppression campaign finds its leverage. The Sejjil-2 eliminates that vulnerability almost entirely. Solid fuel composite propellants are integrated into the missile body during manufacturing. The missile is stored in its launch-ready state. There is no fueling sequence, no extended preparation window, no thermal bloom from propellant loading for a satellite to detect, no chemical signature drifting across the landscape announcing that something is about to happen. The operational sequence for the Sejjil-2 is compressed to its essentials. The transporter erector launcher vehicle drives to a selected position. The missile is raised to vertical. It fires. Preparation time from vehicle arrival at launch point to ignition is measured in minutes, not hours. By the time a surveillance asset identifies the launch vehicle, processes the coordinates, passes targeting information through the command chain, and a response is allocated, in many scenarios the missile is already airborne, and there is a second advantage that is strategically more significant than the launch speed. The Sejjil-2 is road mobile. It requires no fixed launch site, no prepared pad. It can be driven to any location with sufficient open ground and fired from that position. Every road, every valley, every stretch of open terrain within range of a launch corridor becomes a potential firing position. Fixed ballistic missile sites can be mapped, monitored, and struck. Road mobile systems exist across a dispersal area that is, in practical terms, too large to comprehensively survey and too unpredictable to pre-target with confidence. This is what military analysts mean when they describe the Sejjil-2 as survivable, not that it can absorb a strike, but that finding it before it fires is structurally difficult in a way that liquid fuel systems simply are not. The combination of solid fuel, minimal pre-launch signature, road mobility, and compressed preparation time produces a system that does not merely deliver a warhead to its target, it delivers that warhead without providing the adversary a reliable opportunity to prevent the launch. Why Iran waited 54 waves to use it. The Sejjil-2 was ready on day one. Iran had it. Iran knew what it could do. And for 16 consecutive days, 53 consecutive waves, it did not appear. That restraint deserves examination because it is not the behavior of a military running out of options. It is the behavior of a military managing a finite and irreplaceable asset with deliberate patience. The explanation begins not in February 2026, but in June 2025, the 12-day war that preceded this conflict. During that operation, Israeli strikes specifically targeted Iranian ballistic missile infrastructure, including production facilities associated with the Sejjil program. The strikes were designed to do what strategic bombing of industrial capacity is always designed to do: reduce the adversary's ability to replenish what it expends. They succeeded, at least partially. By the time this conflict opened on February 28th, Iran's Sejjil-2 stockpile was finite. Production capacity had been degraded. The missiles remaining in inventory could be fired, but they could not be rapidly replaced, and a weapon that cannot be replaced must be rationed. In the opening waves of a sustained missile campaign, volume is the operational priority. The objective is saturation, overwhelming the adversary's layered defense architecture with enough simultaneous threats that the interception systems cycle through their stockpile faster than it can be replenished. For that task, Iran had other weapons available in sufficient numbers: the Fateh-2, the Arash-2 long-range drone, the Khorramshahr-4 with its cluster warhead, the EMAD systems. The Sejjil-2 was not held back because it was unnecessary. It was held back because it was too valuable to spend before the moment carried strategic weight beyond immediate destructive effect. Wave 54 was that moment, and the manner of its deployment was deliberate in ways that extend beyond the missile itself. The Sejjil-2 was not fired alone. It was fired alongside the Fateh-2, mixed into a barrage that triggered simultaneous sirens in 141 locations across Israeli territory. Not a targeted strike, not a precision operation against a single facility. A barrage wide enough and varied enough in its composition to trigger civil defense responses across effectively the entire inhabited geography of the country at the same moment. 141 locations. That number is the operational definition of strategic saturation. What 1.5 tons does to a reinforced target. There is a number that does not appear often enough in coverage of this conflict. Not the missile's weight, not its range, not its speed. The number is 15. That is the scale difference between the warhead that struck a residential street in central Jerusalem on March 24th, carrying approximately 100 kilograms of explosive content, gutting multiple floors of an apartment building, leaving residents describing the impact as right above them, and what the Sejjil-2 carries at maximum warhead configuration against targets within 1,000 kilometers, 1.5 tons, 15 times the explosive content of the strike that already gutted those apartment floors. Against a civilian structure, that difference is catastrophic. Against hardened military infrastructure, reinforced command bunkers, underground communications nodes, protected Air Force facilities, the kind of targets the Sejjil-2's IRGC targeting doctrine specifically identifies as centers of administration and decision-making affecting Israeli air operations. That difference is not simply greater destruction, it is a categorically different class of engagement. A warhead capable of reaching hardened structures that smaller payloads cannot reliably penetrate. A warhead that transforms the category of target that Iranian missiles can credibly threaten. The IRGC announced that Wave 54 targeted centers of administration and decision-making affecting Israeli air operations, military and defense-related infrastructure. In operational translation, the command and control nodes coordinating Israel's ongoing air campaign against Iranian territory. The communications infrastructure, the command nodes, the decision-making layers from which Israeli air operations are planned, coordinated, and executed. The Sejjil-2's first mission in this conflict was not destruction for its own sake. It was the targeted disruption of the architecture directing the strikes landing on Iranian soil. The Merv question. Nobody can fully answer. And then there is the capability that Western analytical sources have neither confirmed nor denied with certainty, but which Iranian state media and IRGC sources have explicitly claimed. The Sejjil-2's potential MIRV configuration, multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, a single missile, multiple warheads, each separating during the terminal phase, each maneuvering independently toward a distinct target. The claim is technically plausible. The Sejjil-2's launch weight and second-stage architecture provide the physical basis for a MIRV payload. Whether this capability has been operationally demonstrated in the current conflict cannot be confirmed from available open-source reporting with certainty. Intellectual honesty requires that acknowledgement, but the implication of even a subset of deployed Sejjil-2 missiles carrying functional MIRV payloads fundamentally changes the interception mathematics. A single intercept event, already demanding against a maneuvering re-entry vehicle descending through the atmosphere, must now simultaneously engage multiple independently maneuvering warheads diverging towards separate aim points. No current Israeli defense system was designed for that scenario. Arrow 2 engages exo-atmospherically. Arrow 3 operates at even higher altitude. Both depend on detection geometry and radar coverage that has been operating under continuous pressure across 5 weeks of sustained high-tempo missile operations. If the MIRV configuration is real and operational, the Sejjil-2 does not merely stress the defense system. It presents the defense system with a problem it was architecturally never built to solve. The escalation ladder and where Iran stands on it. Each week of this conflict has introduced a new weapons category into the operational record: the Fatah-2 hypersonic glide vehicle, the Fatah-3 cluster hypersonic variant, the Nasrallah multi-warhead missile, the Arash-2 long-range drone, and now the Sejjil-2 in sustained deployment. Not a debut, not a signal, an operational commitment that has persisted from Wave 54 through Wave 79 and beyond. Wave 79, the Sejjil-2 deployed again, this time alongside Gorham Shah and Imad missiles, striking intelligence facilities in northern and central Jerusalem, military and commercial infrastructure in Ramat Gan, and southern military logistics and command headquarters in Beersheba. Northern Jerusalem, Ramat Gan, Beersheba. The full geographic length of the country simultaneously, with the Sejjil-2 contributing its massive warhead specifically to targets selected for their command significance. This is no longer a debut. This is a sustained operational commitment. The Sejjil-2 carries one additional distinction that the analytical record demands be noted. It is entirely Iranian in origin. Unlike most systems in the Iranian ballistic missile inventory, which carry varying degrees of design lineage traceable to North Korean, Russian, Chinese, or Pakistani technology, the Sejjil bears no such resemblance. As former Israeli Ballistic Missile Defense Organization Director Uzi Rubin has observed, Iran built this system indigenously across 2 decades of development without external design templates. A nation that was supposed to have had its military capability destroyed so thoroughly it could never again threaten regional stability, just deployed, for the first time in combat, a domestically engineered super-heavy solid-fuel ballistic missile in its 54th retaliatory wave, and kept deploying it. What the financial dimension looks like now, the Sejjil-2's debut changes the interceptor cost asymmetry in ways that compound what was already an alarming economic equation. Before Wave 54, the attrition math was this. Iran fires a $500,000 Gorham Shah with a cluster warhead. Israel fires a $3.5 million Arrow 3 intercept, a 7-to-1 cost ratio in Iran's favor, running continuously across 53 waves. That ratio was already producing the interceptor stockpile crisis that prompted Israel's emergency $826 million procurement authorization in mid-March. The Sejjil-2 introduces a different problem. Its warhead mass means it must be engaged by the highest capability intercept systems, Arrow 2 or Arrow 3, not by Iron Dome or David's Sling, which were not designed for this trajectory and payload profile. Those Arrow intercepts run $3 million to $3.5 million per shot, 2 per target under doctrine, $6 to $7 million per Sejjil-2 engagement, against a missile that Iran deploys sparingly because it is finite and irreplaceable, but deploys precisely because the damage it delivers exceeds what cheaper options can accomplish against hardened targets. The financial logic of the campaign is now operating at 2 simultaneous levels. Cheap weapons exhausting the interceptor stockpile at scale across dozens of simultaneous targets. Expensive weapons reserved for the targets that only expensive weapons can reach. Both levels drain the same finite inventory. Neither level can be ignored. The downstream financial consequence runs through the same chain it has since day one. Conflict duration extends, strait closure persists, Brent crude stays above $100. Goldman Sachs 2027 projection holds, your gas pump reflects the cost. What the Sejjil-2 adds to that chain is a signal about duration. A military that is rationing its most capable assets for carefully selected moments is not a military approaching exhaustion. It is a military executing a long-term attrition strategy with patience and discipline. That is a conflict with a longer runway than the White House's 4 to 6 weeks framing ever acknowledged. 3 things to watch the Sejjil-2 deployment rate across future waves. When Iran moves from using it selectively in specific waves to using it consistently in every wave, 2 things are happening simultaneously. The stockpile is being drawn down more rapidly, and Iran has assessed that the operational environment now requires its sustained commitment rather than its rationed deployment. Watch for any IRGC wave announcement that references the Sejjil-2 alongside descriptions of its striking command infrastructure. Sustained deployment against command targets means Iran has concluded that persistent pressure on Israeli command architecture is more valuable than conserving the stockpile. The Arrow system's post-wave status reporting. After Wave 79 and the waves that followed, watch for any IDF home front command language about enhanced shelter protocols or extended response windows. That language would indicate that the detection-to-warning timeline for Sejjil-2-size threats is being extended, meaning the defense architecture is adapting to the 7-minute flight time by adjusting what it promises civilians it can guarantee. Any adjustment downward in the promised response window is an acknowledgement that the Sejjil-2's profile is consuming more processing time than earlier systems. The mere confirmation or denial, the single most consequential unanswered technical question in this conflict. If independent seismic data, satellite imagery of impact sites, or post-strike damage assessment from open-source analysts produces evidence of multiple simultaneous impact points from a single Sejjil-2 launch, evidence that 2 or 3 warheads arrived at separate targets from one missile, the interception mathematics change permanently for the remainder of this conflict, and for every future conflict in which this system is deployed. Wave 54 brought the Sejjil-2 to Jerusalem. Wave 79 brought it back. It has not stopped appearing since. The escalation ladder in this conflict has climbed methodically, deliberately, and with no visible ceiling. The Fatah-2 proved that warning time could be compressed below the minimum threshold of civil defense architecture. The Sejjil-2 proved that warhead mass could be scaled to a level that threatens infrastructure classes previously considered out of reach. The Miyavi question, still unconfirmed, suggests the possibility of a next rung that no current intercept system was designed to address. Iran built the Sejjil-2 over 2 decades without external design templates. It held it off the battlefield for 54 waves while deploying everything else. It released it at the moment of maximum strategic impact, confirmed the launch personally through military command, and has continued deploying it with increasing regularity. The only question that remains on the table now is what Wave 100 brings, and what Iran has been saving for that moment.